Today is February 1st, 2024. We are interviewing Erica Feinberg. My name is Esther Finder. Ms. Feinberg is in New York. I am in Henderson, Nevada, in the United States, and the language will be English. Thank you for speaking with us today. What is your name, please? And could you spell it?
Erica Linden Feinberg, E-R-I-C-A, capital L-I-N-D-E-N, capital F-I-N-E-B-E-R-G.
And what was your name at birth?
It was Frederica Roessler, R-O-E-S-S-L-E-R.
And could you spell your
Frederica,
first name too?
F-R-E-D-R-I-C-K-A.
Where were you born?
Borislav, Poland.
And when were you born?
May 8th, 1941.
Forgive me for asking, but how old are you today?
82.
What was your father's name?
Bernard Roessler.
Where was he born?
I don't know this town, but it was Poland.
Had his family lived in the general area for many generations?
Yes.
Can you tell me about his family? Was it a big family or
I believe
religious? Anything you want to share with us?
the family was conservative. They observed holidays, all the Jewish holidays, and I believe they were kosher. He had 2 sisters and 2 brothers.
What work did your father do?
He was an electrical engineer.
Had he ever served in the military?
Yes, he was in the Polish Army.
What did he do in the army?
I don't know.
What would you like to tell us about your father?
Well, I did not know my father. He died after I was born, but he was in the Polish Army. But when he returned from the Polish Army, he was murdered by a Ukrainian as he was coming home. So I never met him.
Did anything happen to the man who killed him?
No, he was Ukrainian. It was allowed. My father was Jewish, and therefore he didn't deserve to live.
What was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Peppy Linden. Actually, it was Peppa Linden. No, sorry. Peppa Sack was her maiden name.
Could you spell that, please?
P-E-P-A-S-A-C-K.
And where was she born?
I don't know. I don't know where she was born.
What work did she do? How did she support you after your father's death?
She worked as a housekeeper, maid, whatever she could do to feed me and her.
Were you an only child?
Yes.
At the time of your birth, who was controlling your part of Poland?
That was the Germans.
I I know you probably don't have firsthand memories, but what do you know about your first year or so of life?
Well, we were in the Borislav ghetto, so life was difficult. Food was scarce. Um, as far as I know, it was a very difficult time to have been born.
How long were you and your mother in the ghetto?
Well, I must have been 11 months old, and she escaped with me.
Can you tell us about this escape?
Well, she had received, she had gotten um, a different identity where she was listed as a Gentile, um, and she had to give up her Jewish religion for survival, basically.
How did she get the false papers?
I don't know.
How were the two of you able to walk out or get out of the ghetto? I mean, physically, how did you leave the ghetto?
So one of her brothers was able to bribe the person who watched the gate, and he pretended he didn't see us leave, and it was in the dead of night, and she just ran as far and as fast as she could, with me in tow.
And where did you go?
So while she was in the ghetto, she learned that there was a job available for a housekeeper, a maid, who needed assistance in taking care of the house and the children that were there. So that is where she took her steps towards that particular farm. So.
Do you have any memory of that place that you went?
No, I don't.
How long was she there? Or were the two of you there?
Yeah, she and I were there for not for a very long time because she felt uncomfortable. She felt like she would be discovered, and she was nervous about remaining there. Also, there were some men in the family that she didn't feel comfortable being around. So again, she packed me up, and at night, after her chores were done, we left. We left the farm.
What are some of your very earliest memories?
My first memory would be of another location. My mother, when she left that particular farm initially, the first farm, she was told that there were jobs in Germany, and so her instinct was to go to Germany to find another job. But in trying to find the closest train station that would take her to Germany, she wound up taking another train that was already in the station, but it was heading towards Austria. So we were able to, or she was able to find work at again, another farm in Austria, And that's the first that I can remember of me remembering the person that was in the farm itself, and that's the first that I can remember.
And that was the farm in Austria.
This was in Austria, correct?
Did anybody help her find employment?
Well, when in between times, in between the first job that she had and Austria, she had gone to another location where could you stop? Could you stop? I need to. Okay. So my mother wound up leaving the first farm, and she right. Okay. So she left the first farm and she got on a train, and the train took her to a small town in Austria. There, she had to find work. And so she was told that there was a center for people who were looking for work. And so she went there, and she was told that there was a job on an estate, and would she be able to work as a cleaning person, cook, and other duties that a housekeeper would do. And she needed the work, she needed the money, so she took the job. It turned out that the estate that she was heading towards was owned by Hermann Goering. Hermann Goering was second to Hitler. When she found that out, she was very upset that she took the job, because now she was putting not only herself in danger, but me as well. So she did take the job. She did go and started working there. But she felt, again, being under the nose of the second in command, who was after her family and herself and any Jew that existed then. She was constantly nervous and cautious about the words that she was saying, remembering the lies that she was giving, and it made her very very upset, and she felt like any minute she would be discovered. And it came to a point where she was so unnerved about where she was that one night she took me and herself to a was like a little lake on the compound, and with all intents and purposes to end it for both of us. And as we were going deeper and deeper, she realized what she was doing and just said, how can I do this? How can I do this to my child? So she turned around. We went back. she packed everything that she had, which was very little, and she left knowing that if she was caught, we would both die. So she took the chance, and somehow nobody was looking for us, and she escaped and wound up at a person's home who needed actually a job, who needed somebody to help because his wife was ill and he needed somebody to take care of the house and the children. So we were there for a while until she got better, until the wife got better. And
Before you get too far away from this place in Austria, I'd like to ask you a few more questions. You said you started to have memories around this time. Do you remember that household, Goering's household?
I do not.
How was your mother treated there?
At Goering's house, well, she was treated as all the other help was treated. You know, they all lived in a as far as I remember what I was overhearing, because the way up to this point, the way I remember things is by what my mother used to tell her relatives. When we got together, they wanted to know how we survived. And so she would tell these stories, and she would relate, what had happened to her. So what I'm telling you now is basically what I overheard. It was never told to me because my mother never wanted me to remember the bad times. And so she was always protective of how we lived at that time and what she had to go through at that time. So that was how I learned about that.
How long did your mother work for Goering?
It was a few months. I would say maybe 5 or 6 months.
Can you please tell me what you know about your escape from Goering's estate? Did your mother ever talk about any strategies or to avoid detection, or did she just hit the road?
So she just overheard the other women gossiping. My mother was attractive, and she had a very fine features, and had a slim figure, and she because of that, there were many times that appearance saved us from things that could have gone really badly for us. But in this case, at the farm, it kind of worked against her because the other women who were there did not like the fact that she was as attractive as she was. So they started gossiping, and one time she overheard one saying to the other, "Wouldn't it be strange if she was Jewish?" And she indicated that she was going to suggest that to the headmistress or whoever ran the farm, the estate, that perhaps we were Jewish. And so that scared my mother, and it gave her a reason to have to leave.
Did you ever go into hiding?
We were hiding from the moment that we left Borislav.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant after you left Gering's estate.
Well, we were still, under false pretenses. We weren't in. We were still Gentile. I, as a child, grew up as a Gentile. I didn't know I was Jewish, and so it didn't. We were in hiding because we were not the people that we were, so to speak. So we were Jews under guise.
I think what I'm trying to get at, that I'm clearly not asking well, when you left Gering's estate, did she feel compelled to be discreet in her route out, or did she just start walking down the road? Was she worried because of who he was that he might go looking for her?
She was worried that she would be caught, and so she felt that, but she had no choice. In her mind, she had no choice but to leave, and whether it meant that she would leave and be caught and then be killed, or take the chance that she had to go just for our safety. So when she left, she just took whatever was hers and fled the estate. Did I answer that?
Yeah. Fine. So now tell me where you went next.
So so we went. We hid in the woods until she felt safe that she could go and continue the escape. We had no food, we had no water, so we ate what was available in the woods, and until we came upon this house where the man who opened the door to her told her that if she could start work, then she has a job because his wife was ill, and he needed someone to take care of his wife who was ill and the children that were in the house. So she was there for a while until the wife got better, and then she was told that there was another household that could use her help, and so she went there. And that's where my memory begins, because that was the place that I remember. I'm sorry, I have to take some water. Otherwise, I'll be croaking all the time.
Take your time.
Okay, all better.
just mentioned something in passing that I want to get some clarification on. You mentioned that you were in the woods. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Sure.
What woods can you?
I don't know the name. I don't know the name of the woods, but it was Gering's farm was surrounded. It was an estate, so it was in the woods, and that's the direction she took, which is just to get out of sight. And so we wound up there until she felt that nobody was pursuing her. So she remained there until she felt it was okay to leave. The woods. It was okay to leave the woods.
Do you know what region of Austria this was?
I do not.
Was near a city or a particular forest or anything?
I don't.
Okay. So now you have some of your own memories.
Correct.
At this point.
Right.
What can you share with us about your living situation?
So this was a man who had property. He had, it was a farm. He had cows and chickens, and it was a stone house, as I recall. And he had a brother that was very ill, and he needed someone to take care of him. So my mother actually was a nursemaid, a housekeeper, a cook. She did everything for them. Up to that point, we were sleeping in an alcove because there was no other space. And my mother befriended the brother of the man who owned the house. And he, as I mentioned, he was very ill. He was dying. And he had a big bedroom. And my mother rearranged the bedroom so that he could face the outdoors, because up to that point, he was facing a wall. And so he was very grateful to her for being so kind to him. And she wound up being more than just a nurse. She wound up talking to him about his past and what he had accomplished in his lifetime. And they became chess players. My mother loved to play chess. And this man was so happy that he had somebody to play with because his brother did not. And so until the day that he died, they had a game of chess every day. And upon his death, which she prepared him after he died for the funeral. His brother, was so grateful to my mother because he felt that she was more than just a nurse to his brother, and he just was grateful for everything that she had done for them. He told her after that we could have the bedroom. So now we were able to stay in an actual bedroom with beds and a room all to ourselves. And because I was now around 2 years, maybe 1.5 to 2 years old, he wanted me to go to a school, to kindergarten or nursery school. And so I was sent to church and taught by nuns who were very, very strict and severe in punishment when you disobeyed. So I wound up being quite afraid of these nuns, and all I wanted to do was just disappear and not be uh, called on. Or on the other hand, when the nuns talked to my mother about me, they would tell her how wonderful I was, and that they really liked me, and I couldn't understand how that could be when I was so afraid of them. Um, but I I I was pretty pretty well. Um, I felt after that, when they told my mother that they liked me, I was very open, and totally changed my character, and wound up being in plays, and singing in church, um, and I was a good Catholic. I learned the prayers, I learned the songs, I was able to uh, uh, pray with the rosary, um, and then I became like their number one student. So that was my memory of that place. I also had a friend. Um, she was a little older than I, who uh, was very outgoing and adventurous, and she liked to explore. And my mother told me that, I can't do what this other girl did, because the other girl was much older, and that I should do things that were comfortable for me, and not try to keep up with her. And one of the things that my mother, always told me was to listen to her, to listen to my mother, and not listen to my friend. Um, but there was one occasion when my friend said she found this wonderful playground, and it was an open field, and we could hide, and we can play, and we can do a lot of things, and why don't I come with her to do that? And I said, well, um, I have to take a nap. My mother always makes me take a nap. So she said, well, you don't have to listen to her all the time. Why don't we just go, and if your mother sees that you're not coming, I'm sure she's busy, and she'll do other things, and she won't miss you. So I was about to leave with her when my mother said, where are you going? And I told her that I was going with my friend. And she said, no, you're not. You're going to come home, and you're going to take your nap, have your lunch, take your nap. Well, it turns out that this friend of mine decided that she was going to go to that field anyway. And she did, and found what she thought was a ball, and she bounced it, and it was a live hand grenade. And she, of course, immediately died. My mother, to show me that I should always listen to her, made me go to her funeral. And that had such an impact on me, because I could not forget what this girl looked like, because it was an open casket. And there were, like, it looked like red streams on her face and her neck. And it was basically her veins that were somehow visible on her skin. And to this day, I still see that girl in the casket with the red markings on her face and on her neck. And from that day on, I listened to my mother.
have different names at any point during the war? Did you have a Christian name as opposed to your birth name?
No, my mother shortened it to Erica, so that was my name. And
You can have a Polish name and a German name.
yes, I did have a Polish name, and the Polish name was Rysia, Rysia.
What can you tell us about the last months of the war?
So my mother was at the farm for about 2 years. The man he was good to us. My mother always thought that he knew who we were, but because he continued to be nice, she felt comfortable. She didn't feel that it was necessary to leave this farm. My mother had a wonderful sense of impending danger. She just knew. She just knew when she had to leave. She knew when there was danger. She knew what she had to do next, even though it wouldn't have been the appropriate thing to do normally. So her sense of things that were not right were just spot on. She was just amazing. Even after the war, she just had this wonderful sense of what was right for her. So what was the question?
I asked about the last months of the war.
Right. So my mother had a neighbor who had a radio, and every once in a while she would catch what was being broadcast, and she learned that the German army was having difficulty, that things were not going well for them. And one day when she was at the neighbor's house, she heard that the war was over, the Germans lost, Hitler killed himself, and she immediately thought about, well, now she has to find her family, whoever wound up still alive. So she didn't want to tell the man that she was working for that she was leaving, because she felt that he was going to try to convince her to stay. And yet she couldn't tell him she was Jewish yet, because the Jews were still being hunted by the Poles and by the Germans. So though the war was over, the Jews still were hunted and killed. So after she saw him off in the morning to do his work, she and I left the farm, got on a train back to Poland to find out if anybody survived. And while she was in Poland, she got in touch with the Red Cross to see if anybody survived from her family. And she learned that her brother did survive. He was in a concentration camp called Dachau, and was looking for her, was looking for anybody that survived the war. So she got someone to write a letter back to her brother to say that we were in Poland and to reach out and see how they could meet. And he wrote back again saying that he would send a ticket, a train ticket, for us to join him in Dachau. The reason we went back to Dachau, or we went to Dachau, and he remained there, is because he started a group called the Jewish Committee. The Jewish Committee was formed after the liberation of Dachau, and they were trying to reunite families that were separated during the Holocaust. And so we came to Dachau, where we reunited with him, and that's where we stayed until we were able to get a visa to the United States.
Before we go too much further, do you happen to remember the name of the man that your mother, the two of you stayed with the last 2 years?
The only name I knew was, I called him Pan. Pan means man in Polish. And that was what I called him throughout the time we were there.
And you mentioned going back to Poland to look for family. Were there any hardships with getting there, with traveling, or with documents or anything like that?
Well, we still had the falsified papers, so we were able to travel with that. My mother did some handiwork for other neighbors, so she had a few dollars or some money that she could buy a ticket for Poland. Poland was a very difficult place to be at that time as well, because they were still hard on the Jewish community. Anybody that was Jewish was still not welcome, and it was a difficult time for Jews to try and find their family members.
Do you remember any anti-Semitic incidents?
No, I do not.
When did you travel to Germany?
So that was 1945.
When was it finally revealed to you that you were Jewish?
So, funny story. So my mother went to Dachau to reunite with my uncle, and my mother met her husband, her second husband, my adoptive father, when my uncle introduced her to him. They were in Dachau together. The only father I knew was my adoptive father. His name was Joseph Lindenberger. And after she met him, it was not long before they got married. At that time, people just wanted a connection with one another after the horrible time that they had. They just needed companionship. And it turned out for my mother that it was the best that she could have gotten. My father was amazing. But anyway, so they married, and one of the things that the town of Dachau had to do for any concentration camp survivor was they had to give them shelter in their homes until they were able to find the next place to live. So we lived in this German people's home. We had a bedroom, which my parents and I shared, and the use of the kitchen. So one of the things that my father said I have to be, one of the things that I had to learn was that I was not Catholic, I was Jewish. And so I was entered into a Hebrew school that was formed in Dachau. It was a school just for young Jewish survivors. I was 4 at that time, maybe 5. And at first, my mother or my father would walk me to the school. And every time we walked there, there was a church on the corner. And I really wanted to go into that church, but I knew that if I'd go in the church, my mother and my father would be displeased because I had to go to this Jewish school where I was learning to be Jewish. So one time, my father said to my mother, it's time that she started going to school by herself. So I was allowed to go by myself, and this church was calling me. I had to go into that church. So instead of going to the Hebrew school, I went to church. And then somebody, I suppose from the Hebrew school, came to my mother to the house, and she wanted to know what was I sick? Was I not coming to school? And my mother said, but she went to school. So they were all looking for me, and my mother remembered that every time I passed that church, I would look in and try to see what was going on there. And so she went to the church, and there I was, talking to the priest. And after that, she said to me, you can't go there. This is not your home. You have to go to where you're meant to go. And that was that. I didn't go to church anymore after that. I didn't want to upset my mother, and I didn't want to upset my father. And so that was it.
What did being Catholic or being Jewish mean to you at that point?
So being Catholic was everything to me. I was raised as a Catholic. You know, you have to understand that from age 1.5 or thereabouts, that was my life. Went to church every day, to the nursery school. Went to church on the Sunday to pray. Said my prayers every night before I went to sleep. I mean, that was it. And then all of a sudden, like, I was dunked in cold water. All of a sudden, I had to be somebody else that I wasn't. So it was a difficult transition. Um, but I made it. What it means, what being Jewish to me now means everything. And I think my father taught me that. He lived through horrific times. He was marched from concentration camp to concentration camp, uh, wound up in Dachau, had typhus, had all kinds of diseases, was malnutritioned when he was um, rescued by the American forces. And he told me the only thing that kept him alive was the fact that he believed in God. And he prayed every day. He prayed every morning. He prayed every night. He never stopped believing. And that was it.
During your early childhood, when you were going to church, and up until the time you became aware that you were Jewish, did you ever have any exposure to anti-Semitism? I mean, did anybody say anything about Jews while you were going to church? Or did you not even hear the word?
In the beginning, when we were in Austria, I never heard the word Jew. No. However, when I was in Dachau and we lived in that German family's home, they had a son, and he would annoy me. He would call me Jew names. He pushed me down a flight of stairs. We were not welcome in that home, obviously, because we were forced on this family and they resented it.
Were you with your mother when she first reunited with her brother?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that reunion?
I can, because I remember it like it was yesterday. So we got off the train at the Dachau train stop, and we were walking towards my uncle's, where he was living, my uncle's place of residence. And it was early in the morning, and we were approaching the address, and my mother just stopped in front of the house. It must have been it was just daybreak, so it must have been like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And with the loudest voice she could scream out, she called his name. And of course, all the neighbors opened their windows. They wanted to know what the commotion was about. And then we looked up, and on the second floor, there was my uncle. He was waving to us, and then he came running down and immediately put me on his shoulders. And I remember just looking down and looking at him and saying, "Who is this man who is just, holding me and putting me on his shoulders and hugging me and kissing me?" And he just would not stop. It was very annoying to a 4-year-old, as you can imagine. So, especially if it was somebody that I didn't know. And then, of course, so he was engaged to a woman who he had met, who was an Auschwitz survivor, and she was living with him at that time. And she came running down in her nightgown. And so it was like everybody screaming and yelling and happy and tears. And it was just, it was a moment in time.
Did they talk about other family members?
So they wound up, as it turned out, so my mother was a family of brothers and sisters. So she had two brothers and three sisters. One of the brothers, my uncle, survived, and the youngest sister survived. The others all died. I don't know how they died, but obviously they were killed. Yeah, that was it.
I know you didn't know your biological father, but did you ever meet any of his relatives? Did any of them survive?
Yes. Well, so his oldest sister, Sally, came to the United States in the, I believe, in the 1920s, maybe 30s, maybe late 20s, early 30s. She was not liked by the woman that her father wound up marrying. And so she was sent to the United States to live with relatives. And so she was here since before the Holocaust. And somehow she found out that her brother's wife and child survived the war and was searching for us. And she's one of the sponsors that made it possible for us to come to the United States, because you could not emigrate to the United States without two sponsors and money that you could live on for a certain amount of time. So she's the only one that survived from that family. My father had two sisters and three brothers. One of the brothers wound up in Russia, and so he lived there until after the Holocaust. And there was another sister who married a Gentile, and she survived because of that. And that was it. The others all were died.
Was this your adoptive father you were just telling us about?
No, that was my birth father.
Your bio. How long did you stay in Germany after the war?
We arrived in between 45 and 1945, 1946, and we came to the United States in 1949.
What were your expectations of the United States?
I had no expectations because I was 6 years old. But my mother wanted to reunite with her brother, who had left for the United States before we did. So she wanted to stay close to him. And so did her sister. Her sister emigrated before us as well. So she wanted to go to the United States. My father, on the other hand, wanted to go to Israel. And so the decision was made that whatever visa would come through first, we would go there. And as it turned out, the visas for the United States came first.
What were your first impressions of America?
So we were actually, so once we got the information that we were going to go to the United States, we had to go to, I guess it was like a displaced persons camp, because we were there for several months until our ship that would take us to the United States arrived. So we were there for, I would say, a good 2-3 months. And then our ship, which was called General Black, arrived. And so I think we were in Bremen then. At that time, Bremen was the city that had a port. And so we were leaving from that port. And we left in April. And in April, the ocean was very, very, it was lots of storms. We had a terrible trip. And everybody on board ship was sick, except me and my father. Somehow we were able to not have the problems that my mother and all the other passengers were having. So we were on board, on what do you call it, on the deck when we saw the skyline of New York. And my father was so excited because he saw the Statue of Liberty. And that's how we arrived. But it was horrible 7 days at sea.
What challenges were hard for you and your family when you came to America?
So we were put up in one of the hotels that it was just a room with a hot plate, and somehow we had to make do with what we had. My mother had a big family here. She had an aunt who would have been my grandmother's sister. She was the other sponsor that brought us to the United States. So we, and I came down with chicken pox. It was a difficult time because one room, 3 people, hot plate, very little money, and relatives who were trying to help. And the other challenge was nobody spoke English. We only spoke German or Polish. And the next hurdle was for my parents to find work and a place to live. So my mother and father started taking English lessons at some of the uh, at a public school nearby and tried to learn as much as they could, because the only way that they could get a job was if they spoke some English. Also, jobs were very difficult to find at that time because soldiers were coming back. They wanted work. They were the first ones to get jobs. And so any jobs that a non-American would get was very menial. So my father, who was a chemical engineer by profession, and my mother, who was a very intelligent and 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 who was a very intelligent person, had to find work so that we could then find a place to live that they could afford. So my father wound up being a nighttime, all-around person who would haul boxes to I don't know. He. All I know is that he worked from 11 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning, doing horribly menial work, physical menial work. My mother got a job in a factory sewing hats, and that was piece work, which meant for every hat that she would complete, she would get a certain amount of money. She would work from 7 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening. So after a while, they were able to get some money together. We were able to get an apartment in Brooklyn. We lived in Borough Park. My father would take me to school. He would prepare breakfast for me, bring me to school, pick me up at lunchtime, make lunch for me, bring me back to school. My mother would come home. She would pick me up from school, and then that's how we lived until they were able to find decent work. My father did find work. He was a chemical engineer for a oil refinery company, and my mother became a corseteer, which she worked at and finally became manager of a big store.
And where did you settle
Well, so we lived in Borough Park.
the whole time?
Sorry?
The whole time?
We were in Borough Park until I was 16, and then we moved to Queens.
How were you received by Americans?
So I knew no English, and I was thrown into a public school system that did not speak my language. And so I was put a year behind my grade until I learned the language. And that took a little while. It took a year. And then I was put in the appropriate grade. I witnessed anti-Semitism one time, which was when my parents and I took a trip to Maine, and we were at it was, I guess, like a coffee shop that we stopped in, and my father, it was a very hot day. I remember that. And my father said, why don't we get some ice cream? So we went into this place, and from the time that my father adopted me in Germany, I wore a Star of David, and I never took it off. And I still have not taken it off. But we walked into that coffee shop, and as the dish of ice cream was handed to me, the man looked at me and then looked at my father, and he said, "We don't serve Jews here." So that was like, for me at that time, I must have been like 13, 14. It was like a slap in my face. But it was never forgotten either.
You mentioned before that your mother told other people about her survival, but didn't speak directly to you. Is that?
That's correct.
Did you ever approach her and try to ask her?
Yes. Especially at the end of her life, I wanted to take down information that was correct. And she could not. She could tell somebody else, but she couldn't tell me. I don't know what stopped her. I don't know why she would not talk to me about that. But every time I approached it, she would find another reason not to talk about it at that time.
What questions did people ask you about your survival? Did anybody ask you?
Yes, many. I did not really openly tell anybody that I was a survivor. I never really thought of myself as a survivor, and it wasn't until a cousin of mine had said, "But you lived through it. You may not have remembered it, but you are a survivor." So I never talked about my past, except when people would ask, what I had done prior to meeting them. And so I would tell them that, that I had arrived in the United States from another country. And one of the people that I wound up working for had asked me, could I ever forgive the Germans for what happened? And I said, I really can't answer that, because it was my mother that had gone through it, and I was just along with her. I just happened to be there because she bore me at that time. But I really felt like I did not actually live the fear that my mother and my relatives had.
In what ways do you think the war impacted the way your mother parented you?
My mother was very protective of me. I never left her sight. As much as she could, she had her eyes on me all the time, except for the time when when I was sent to nursery school and church, and and but that basically was the only time that I left her side. Um, so that fear of not knowing where I am if she didn't see me was constant, and it it was overbearing sometimes because I felt like I had to report what I was doing at all times, otherwise she would be worried, and I could not allow her to worry needlessly. So um, if I didn't call her uh, to let her know how my day was after I left the home, I mean, even when I was married, she had to know what I was doing, how I was doing, uh, and it, it 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 affected me. I think from the time that I was able to understand her fear, um, it was always, it was like she she had to know that I was safe. She had to know that nothing was harming me, even when I had a cold or I had the flu or uh, when I was pregnant. It was like she had she had to have eyes on me all the time.
How do you think your childhood experiences informed your view of the world?
Are you speaking about currently?
However you want to answer.
So, what is taking place now has really um, has really made my mother's fears come true. She was always fearful that what happened at the time of her survival was going to happen again. And here it is. Um, what she was running away from is right here and now. And it is so hurtful to see this hate, this this brutality. If you think about October 7th, how 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 can that live in a human being? How does that hate evolve? Where does it come from, and why? Why is it that the Jewish people are always hunted, disrespected? It just is a question that is unanswerable.
When you and I spoke before, you mentioned that you wanted to talk about your sense of vulnerability. Would you like to address that?
My biggest fear is I've lived my life, and frankly, I've lived my life very well. I had a good husband. My parents were unbelievable. I have wonderful children, 2 sons. I have wonderful grandchildren. My biggest fear is for my grandchildren. They, although they aren't as devoted to our religion as I would like them to be, I am fearful for the fact that they are Jewish, born Jewish, that they have a life that is free of this prejudice. And my fear is that they won't. That the fact that on their birth certificate it says Jew, I'm afraid that they're not going to have a life like I did.
In what ways do you think the war impacted the way you parented your children?
I don't think that I provided enough information about what had happened during the Holocaust. I think I should have been more diligent in telling them about the hardships that my parents lived through. I think that that was it was my fault for trying not to scare them. I remember one time my parents used to take my boys for a weekend, and my youngest son was with them. And he asked, so they were in the car, and he asked them, "Do I look Jewish, Grandma?" And my mother turned around and she said, "Why would you ask a question like that?" And he said, "Well," he said, there was some talk about how Jews were hunted, and I just wanted to know if I looked Jewish." And so my mother said, "No, you don't look Jewish." She said, "But I want you to know that you are Jewish and should be proud of who you are."
Do you speak publicly about your experiences?
No. I did once. My granddaughter had I think it was during one of the Holocaust memorial days. So she had asked that I speak at her school, but it was it was in a classroom. It was a very small audience.
You wanted me to ask you about the people you are most comfortable with. Would you like to speak about that?
Um, in what context was that?
Who are the people you are most comfortable with today?
Socially? Well, so I still have three very good friends that I went to high school with. Um, one of them is also a Holocaust survivor. Um, I have another friend who actually introduced me to you, who is a Holocaust survivor. I feel comfortable with almost everybody. I mean, I never had prejudices against anyone. Um, I still feel comfortable in a church. I feel more comfortable in a synagogue, but I have no animosity towards anyone. Uh, I wish that were true in the reverse.
Is there anything that we did not talk about yet that you'd like to add before we conclude?
Mm. No, I think we covered it very well. I did want to talk about my adopted father a little bit more. Um, he he was married prior to my marrying my mother. I believe he did have a child. Again, that was not discussed uh, in our family for I don't know what reason, but I found that out later that he was married. Um, he was an unbelievable person. Like I said, he was marched through several concentration camps and wound up being such a gentle, good, a remarkable person. He very unassuming. He had a very major position at these petroleum companies. He wound up at Texaco as one of their lead chemists. Um, Never talked about how important he was, um, and just my friends loved to come to my house because they loved being with him because he was such a gentle, good person, always wanting to know about the other person, what their interests were, what what motivated them. Um, and he had the best giggle that everybody enjoyed getting out of him. His grandchildren adored him. That's pretty much it.
What message do you have for future viewers of this interview?
I'm sorry.
What message do you have for people who will watch this interview in the future?
So, never be content with people. Jewish people should never be content with the way if things are good and easy, because as history just proved, you you have to always look to make sure that um, that bad things aren't just around the corner. I never thought that I would see what I'm seeing now. And like I said before, I lived an amazingly good life, never thinking that this could happen again. And it has. So being complacent is really not the answer, especially for the Jewish people. My father used to say, Israel will never see peace. There'll always be something that is going to interrupt the life that they live. And again, I mean, he was right. He was right. I'm not a pessimist. I've never been a pessimist, but in this particular case, he was right.
Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you. So that's my mother,
Her name?
Peppa Linden, Peppa Rosler Linden. She is around 20 years old there.
So when do you think this was taken and where?
This was in Poland, taken 1930, maybe 35, 1935.
Okay, and your name, please?
Erica Feinberg.
Okay, thank you.
That's my father.
Who are these people?
That's my father, Bernard Rosler, and those are his two sisters, Bronya and Bina.
Which is which, right, left?
On the left of him is Bina, and on the right of him is Bronya.
And when and where was this taken?
I don't know. It was, I mean, he was in the Polish army, so that's he's in his uniform. 1939. It had to be around 1939 because that's when the Polish army took him in. So, yeah.
And it was taken where?
That was in Poland.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us about this photo, please?
Yes, that's my mother, Peppy Rosler, at that time, and me. I'm around one year old.
And your name?
Erica Rosler.
And when and where was it taken?
I have no idea. But I would think that would be after we left the Borislav ghetto.
So what country do you think it was taken?
Poland. That was Poland.
An approximate year?
1942.
Okay, thank you. And this photo, can you tell us about it?
Yes, this was at Pan's home. It's right outside his kitchen. And that's me. I'm maybe 2 years old there.
Your name?
Erica Feinberg. And I think I'm holding a doll that he bought me.
And what country?
Austria.
And And an approximate year?
1943.
Thank you. Who are these people?
That is my mother and my father, who were married in 1945 in Dachau. So
And their names, please?
Peppa Linden, Joseph Linden,
And when was this picture taken?
1945.
And what country?
It's Dachau, Germany.
Thank you. And please tell us about this picture.
This is my mother, Peppy Linden, my father, Joseph Linden, and me, Erica Feinberg, in Bremen, Germany, while we were waiting for the boat, the ship, to take us to the United States.
So what year would this be?
1949.
Thank you. Please tell us about this picture.
This is on board General Black, the ship that brought us to the United States. That's my mother on the left. No, that's my mother. She's on my right. And the person next to her, I don't remember her name, but she was another person on board ship. And that is me, Erica Feinberg, in the front.
Was this taken at sea?
Yes.
Was it taken at sea?
Yes, it was.
And what year?
1949.
Thank you. Can you tell us about this?
That is my father, Joseph Linden, my mother, Peppa Linden, and me, Erica Feinberg, and my doll, Rebelle. When my father adopted me, that was in 1946.
And where was this taken?
Dachau, Germany.
Thank you. And this photo, who are these people?
That is my mother, Peppa Linden, and my father, Joseph Linden. He was getting an award from Texaco Oil Company at a dinner.
Do you know when and where
That
this was taken?
it was in a hotel. Don't remember which one, but that was 1957, 58.
In the United States?
In the United States.
Thank you. Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
This is my birth certificate. It says Erica Rosler, born May 8th, 1941.
Thank you. Please tell us who this is.
This is my father, Bernard Rosler, who was taken approximately 1940 in Poland.
Thank you very much. And this now concludes the interview today.